You're standing in a foggy London alleyway in 1888, watching a Victorian police officer blow a brass whistle at literally nothing, while halfway across the world, a guy in a bowler hat is building a hotel with secret trapdoors. And you're probably wondering how humanity survived an era where the pinnacle of criminal investigation was basically just pointing at the weirdest guy in town and asking nicely if he did a murder. Well, to understand how criminal investigation evolved, we have to look at the people who forced it to change. For most of human history, getting away with a horrific crime relied entirely on two things: having a lot of money or relying on the fact that the police hadn't invented science yet. Let me break it down with terms you're familiar with. Imagine you're playing the game Among Us, but nobody has a map, the chat function is disabled, and everyone is legally blind. If someone gets eliminated, all you can do is stand around the cafeteria and vote out the guy who looks the most nervous. That was forensic science before the 20th century. Blood typing didn't exist. Fingerprinting, barely a concept. Killer number 1 on our list is Elizabeth Báthory. In the late 16th century, Báthory was a Hungarian noblewoman from one of the most powerful families in Transylvania. Between 1590 and 1610, she was accused of torturing and killing potentially hundreds of young women. How did she get away with it for so long? She was rich. Local authorities completely ignored the disappearing peasant girls until Báthory made the fatal political mistake of targeting minor nobility. As historian Harold Schechter points out in his extensive writings on historical crime, wealth and political immunity were the original getaway cars of the ancient world. But by the late 1800s, the world was urbanizing. Which brings us to killer number 2, Jack the Ripper. In 1888, an unidentified killer murdered at least 5 women in the Whitechapel district of London. The real story here isn't just the mystery, it's the hilariously terrible police work. The Metropolitan Police were so out of their depth that they were arresting completely random people based on local gossip, while the newly established daily newspapers realized that printing unverified, sensational letters allegedly from the killer sold millions of copies. The media circus actively trampled the crime scenes. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, killer number 3 was taking advantage of a different kind of chaos. During the massive spectacle of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, a scam artist named H. Holmes built a sprawling 3-story building that the press later dubbed the Murder Castle. He used the transient crowds of the World's Fair to run insurance scams and commit murders without anyone noticing. Holmes was the ultimate arrogant narcissist. After finally being caught by the Pinkerton Detective Agency for financial fraud, he famously claimed, "I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer, no more than the poet can help the inspiration to sing." Fast forward to the mid-20th century. Police now had fingerprinting, blood typing, and basic forensics. But they were about to face a new era of killers, narcissists who were so desperately starved for attention that they actively taunted the press. Killer number 4 is the Zodiac. Operating in Northern California in the late 1960s, the Zodiac wasn't just a killer, he was a desperate media hound. He sent complex cryptograms to local newspapers, threatening violence if they didn't put his puzzles on the front page. In one letter he wrote, "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all," complete with his own terrible spelling errors. Killer number 5 took the media obsession to the East Coast. In 1976, David Berkowitz, known as the Son of Sam, terrorized New York City. He left rambling, bizarre letters at crime scenes mocking the NYPD. The city was paralyzed by fear. But the sheer absurdity of his eventual arrest is staggering. The biggest manhunt in New York history ended because Berkowitz got a parking ticket near one of his crime scenes. When arrested, he tried to claim a demon possessed his neighbor's dog and commanded him to do it. But the absolute peak of criminal arrogance and stupidity belongs to killer number 6, Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. Operating in Kansas starting in the 1970s, Rader went quiet for over a decade. But in 2004, he got annoyed that people were forgetting about him, so he started communicating with the media again. Rader literally mailed a letter to the police asking, "Can I communicate with Floppy and not be traced to a computer?" Be honest. The police publicly responded through a newspaper ad saying basically, "Yeah man, totally safe, send the floppy disk." He did. The police immediately pulled the metadata off the disk, traced it to his church computer, and arrested him. While the media hounds were begging to be famous, the most terrifying figures of the 1970s and 80s were the ones who realized the best way to get away with murder was to look like a perfectly normal, upstanding citizen. Killer number 7 is Ted Bundy. Bundy weaponized the fact that he was handsome, educated, and well-dressed. He would wear a fake cast on his arm, drop his books, and ask young women for help loading them into his Volkswagen Beetle. Bundy completely shattered the stereotype of the creepy-looking loner. In a terrifying moment of self-awareness before his execution, he told an interviewer, "We serial killers are your sons, we are your husbands, we are everywhere." Killer number 8, John Wayne Gacy, took this normalization even further. In the 1970s, Gacy was a respected contractor in the Chicago suburbs, politically active, and literally dressed up as Pogo the Clown to entertain at children's hospitals. Behind the suburban facade, he buried 26 of his 33 victims in the crawlspace directly beneath his own house. Killer number 9, Jeffrey Dahmer, exposed how inherent biases in police work could result in catastrophic tragedy. Operating in Milwaukee, Dahmer preyed on marginalized young men in the gay community, people the police were historically notorious for ignoring. This prejudice peaked in 1991 when a 14-year-old victim named Konorak Synthesomphone managed to escape Dahmer's apartment, bleeding and drugged. Neighbors found him and called 911. But when the police arrived, Dahmer smoothly lied, claiming the boy was his adult roommate and they were just having an argument. The police, unwilling to investigate a domestic dispute between two gay men, literally handed the victim back to his killer and left. It is one of the most shameful moments in modern law enforcement history. Dahmer was only stopped later that year when a man named Tracy Edwards fought him off, escaped the apartment with a handcuff still dangling from his wrist, and physically flagged down a patrol car, leading them back to Dahmer's door. Killer number 10 broke a different demographic mold completely. Between 1989 and 1990, Aileen Wuornos, a transient highway sex worker in Florida, killed 7 men. The media and law enforcement were initially baffled because the profile of a female serial killer who used a firearm and operated on highways basically didn't exist in their databases at the time. The era of these prolific multi-year serial killers has largely faded into history, and that isn't an accident. It wasn't that human nature got better, it was that the technology finally removed the blindfolds. The invention of automated fingerprint databases, ubiquitous CCTV cameras, cell phone location tracking, and the ultimate nail in the coffin, DNA profiling, has made it nearly impossible to operate in the shadows for years on end. We look back at the Victorian cops blowing whistles in the fog, or the 1970s detectives manually sorting through millions of index cards, and it feels absurd. But the terrifying truth is that those early killers weren't necessarily evil geniuses playing 4D chess. They were just playing a brutal game where the authorities hadn't even learned the rules yet. But how exactly did scientists manage to turn a single microscopic drop of blood into a mathematical equation that could put someone in prison forever? Well, next time on Hismytical.